Welcome. And the question today from Kentucky Fried Eel is: what famous person has done something incredibly heinous, but has often been overlooked? Hi, this is Derek. I just put the Drama Llama, Fred, back in his llama pen, so that I can do this quick video for you with some of the stuff that Fred found on Reddit earlier today. Oh boy, let's get ready for some drama. Hey-Do 1877 answered with: Marcus Alonso, left back for Chelsea FC, was drunk driving and got his passenger killed. Should have gone to prison, paid €61,000 and is often brushed under the rug. Boris Godunov answered with: Notre Dame football coach Brian Kelly. Kelly insisted on having student videographers record practices. Back in October of 2010, the region was experiencing a very bad windstorm, 50+ mph gusts, and Kelly hated to move practice inside. So once the rain and lightning was over, he moved it back outside, despite the high winds. The videographers had to climb into scissor lifts and ascend up to 40 feet high in this weather. As you can guess, the wind eventually blew over one of the lifts, sending it crashing down to a nearby street and killing the videographer, 20-year-old Declan Sullivan. Just before the accident, Sullivan tweeted out some heartbreaking messages expressing his fear over the situation. The team's practice continued for 25 minutes after the scissor lift fell over. Despite the university being determined to be at fault for Sullivan's death, Kelly was never really held to account for his reckless decision to hold practice outside in horrendous weather and to continue to have the videographers up on unstable lifts. It should have ended his coaching tenure at the school that year. But collegiate sports money and power doesn't abide by such silly notions of responsibility. Emily J. F. off followed with: 20-year-old Declan Sullivan. Dude, I know he was a legal adult. But remembering where I was, emotionally and financially, at 20 years old, I'm particularly disgusted and assume this guy was under a lot of pressure. I may just be projecting, but this whole story strikes me as vile. Skeledon followed up with: I knew a relative of Declan's back in high school. This was absolutely tragic, and completely preventable. My heart forever goes out to the Sullivan family. Bender is great. Bender answered with: most people remember Rick James for his catchy funky music, his erratic drug issues, or the hilarious Chappelle Show Charlie Murphy True Hollywood Stories skit. What people don't bring up as commonly. In 1991, James and his girlfriend Tanya Hijazi were accused of holding 24-year-old Frances Allie hostage for up to 6 days, tying her up, forcing her to perform sexual acts, and burning her legs and abdomen with the hot end of a crack cocaine pipe during a week-long cocaine binge. He faced life in prison for kidnapping, assault, and torture but only received a 5-year sentence and ultimately served 2 years total. I feel like that was a pretty heinous series of acts that have been often overlooked over the past 30 years. Spruce Moose followed up with: I've been on a binge watching In Living Color. They actually did a sketch on this. They have quite a few sketches about topical things from the early 90s that would never be on network TV today. Nanya Bees answered with: most Americans probably won't know the name Jimmy Savile, but what he got away with for decades is absolutely awful. Countless sexual assaults against people, mostly children, all the way up to the elderly. Worse than that, his behavior was covered up by elements within the BBC as he was employed by them. He's dead now, but he got away with it his whole life, likely thousands of victims. Always for Scuba followed with: for those that haven't heard of him, what makes his crime so heinous was that Savile's whole thing was helping kids. His TV show, Jim'll Fix It, was based around making kids' dreams come true. He was absolutely adored by British and Irish kids in the 80s. This, coupled with raising money for children's charities, gave him massive access to children in hospitals and care homes. I'm not religious, but I choose to believe that this particular effort is burning in hell. We will share you chimed in with: someone I know was a nurse in one of the children's hospitals he committed his atrocities at. She said one time she was on the night shift and saw him coming out of a kid's room much later than he ever had business being there. She thought it was weird, but at the time he was around so often doing visits, giving gifts, etc., she just assumed the kid's family was in there too. I can't imagine what she must have felt when the news broke after he died. Fart Kilometer answered with: During the filming of the Twilight Zone movie, John Landis demanded a scene be shot in the middle of the night and beyond the amount of time that child actors are allowed to work. Paid off their parents in cash from his own pocket. During the scene, there were big pyro effects and a helicopter pilot hovering dangerously low. The pilot was trying to keep safe, but Landis kept telling him to get lower. Pyroblast damaged the tail rotor of the helicopter, which lost control and crashed, decapitating an actor and one of the children. The second child was crushed to death. Edit, my mistake, the passengers in the helicopter were not killed. SF Loredan followed up with, Steven Spielberg broke off his friendship with Landis over this incident. Linvented. Hamburgers followed up with, that one's horrible. Apparently Spielberg was pushing him to get it done by that night. All the blame fell on Landis, but apparently Spielberg was able to dodge any responsibility in the end. Grown-up Gabe answered with, Alex Trebek shaved off his mustache with no regard for anyone's feelings about it. Yeah. He did it. And we will never be able to unsee that. Zero Z answered with, Alison Mack, of Smallville fame, was a member of the Nexium cult and was personally responsible for human trafficking, sexual assault, branding, and literally making other women sexual slaves of the guru. She's currently under house arrest awaiting sentencing. Klaus Kinski was a violent lunatic who also raped his own daughter. The number of professional athletes who have raped or abused people and animals or committed heinous crimes with impunity is too long to list. Harsamaja followed up with, I don't know if Alison Mack's crime has been overlooked. I mean, she was C-list famous, as not quite the main character on a teen drama 15 years ago. And now she's maybe B-level famous as a crazed sex cult leader and an abuser, with her name splashed all over the news? Sam Deed chimed in with, this one, Alison Mack, really pissed me off. I really liked her on Smallville and couldn't believe she would do something as evil as this. Now I just want her to spend time in prison. Introductory Scandal answered with, Boy George, man handcuffed an escort to a wall and beat them with a metal chain. Him Stork followed up with, this is what I was going to come in and add. It goes beyond that too. He had the guy chained to the wall and was about to sexually torture him with objects. But the guy managed to break free and escape. This wasn't rough play, it was attempted straight up Gacy poop. He was just incompetent at it and got a slap on the wrist. Sophie Turlska chimed in with, at least he was actually penalized for it. One of the more bizarre aspects of the Gacy case, like any of it wasn't bizarre, but you know what I mean, was that he flat out kidnapped two guys whom he raped and tortured and then released for whatever reason. One guy was bi, I'm not sure about the other one. But the point is that they were kidnapped, raped, and tortured so badly they were hospitalized, and they identified Gacy. Cops' reaction? Interview him and accept his explanation that it was consensual slave sex, case dropped, lol gaze. Meanwhile, nobody's even bothered to check his past convictions or figured out that this is the same guy who's had several teen employees up and vanish. Effie Grant answered with, John Stamos admitted in Jane magazine to tricking a girl into having sex with his friend. He bragged that he started making out with this girl in a dark room, got up to brush his teeth, and then let his friend go in and have sex with her. No one mentions it. Some dirtbag just gets a pass, I guess. JP Money 26 answered with, Joe Kennedy, father of the Kennedy family, had Rosemary Kennedy, John F. Kennedy's sister, lobotomized. Toady 9622 followed up with, he didn't even tell his wife until after it was done. He was also the ambassador to the UK, and was a Hitler apologist. JFK and his older brother Joe behaved so recklessly and bravely during World War II because they were so humiliated by their father's horrendous behavior. People Asker chimed in with, in 1941, when she was 23 years old, Rosemary Kennedy received a lobotomy. 2 holes were drilled in her skull, through which small metal spatulas were inserted. The spatulas were used to sever the link between the prefrontal cortex and the rest of the brain. Though it is not known whether he did so on Rosemary, Dr. Freeman would often insert an ice pick through the patient's eye to sever the link as well as the spatula. Throughout the entire procedure, Rosemary was awake, speaking with doctors and reciting poems to nurses. They knew the procedure was over when she stopped speaking. Immediately after the procedure, the Kennedys realized that something was wrong. Rosemary could no longer speak or walk. She was moved to an institution and spent months in physical therapy before she regained movement, and even then it was only partially in one arm. Rosemary Kennedy spent 20 years in the institution, unable to speak, walk, or see her family. It wasn't until after Joe suffered a massive stroke that Rose went to go see her daughter again. In a panicked rage, Rosemary attacked her mother, unable to express herself any other way. That is one of the most horrific/saddest things I've read in a while. It's like a horror film. I'm speechless. It left me crying. Yikes. You know, that made me cringe. Wowzer. Above Earth 31 answered with. Chris Benoit is more known for the circumstances of his death, long story short. He's a wrestler, received too much chair shots to the head in his career. Developed the brain of a 80-plus-year-old man at barely 40. Had a breakdown and killed his wife, his son, and then himself. Once they learned this, WWE tried to basically bury him and act like he never existed despite the fact that he was an enormous main eventer back then. Everyone is aware of this and it's often debated whether Benoit is a victim or not. But then you have Jimmy Snuka over there who killed his girlfriend in cold blood for seemingly no reasons, and this mother effer is in the Hall of Fame and no one seems to care. Xanthi followed up with, I remember the episode they had in memorial for him. It was very heartbreaking. Now if you try to look him up, everything has been removed. Honestly, I think it should have been talked about more because pro athletes go through a lot of head trauma. This should have been used as a learning lesson instead of hidden away. And finally, WDH 1977 answered with, Alice Walton, heiress of the Walmart fortune, isn't a good driver. Walton has been involved in multiple automobile accidents, one of them fatal. She lost control of a rented Jeep during a 1983 Thanksgiving family reunion near Acapulco and plunged into a ravine, shattering her leg. She was airlifted out of Mexico and underwent more than 24 surgeries. She suffers lingering pain from her injuries. In April 1989, she struck and killed 50-year-old Alita Hardin, who had stepped onto a road in Fayetteville, Arkansas. Witnesses stated that Walton was speeding at the time, but no charges were filed. In 1998, she hit a gas meter while driving under the influence of alcohol. She paid a $925 fine. Well, there you have it. A perfectly great question answered by a bunch of fine and honorable citizens. Help support this channel by smashing the like and subscribe buttons. And hit that silly little bell as well to ensure you get the latest videos as they come out. Fred is always finding stuff for me to post regularly. So this is Derek signing off. Thanks for watching. Good grief, it sounds like Fred is out of his pen again. I think he found more drama for me to share with you. See you soon.